Hi, it's Rachel from Tea and Forget-Me-Nots. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking or subscribing, or watching another video in the playlist. I found this chest made from MDF on FreeCycle. Clearly someone had made it for their mum for a birthday present, as it had a really sweet message on the inside saying happy birthday mum. But the time had come when mum no longer wanted the chest and it was available. Because of the MDF and solid wood trim, it was really heavy. They'd put rope handles in, and whilst they held up fine, I couldn't help but think that one day it was going to snap and land on my foot as I moved it. The chest was in pretty good condition, even though it was very basic. As MDF isn't solid wood, it's important not to get water near it, otherwise the water can soak in and make the MDF swell up or bubble. To get rid of the few paint splotches on the top, I used a medium grit sandpaper and just roughly went over it, and then cleaned it off any residue with the tack cloth. The chest didn't really need any repairs, but I used some Dixie mud as wood filler to fill in the few spots where there were nail holes and where the corners met and they weren't perfectly matched up. It's important to prime MDF because it's so absorbent. If you don't prime it, then you'll just end up using more paint in the end. And again, you don't want to use a water-based primer for this step. For the main colour of the chest, I chose the navy blue colour Deep Sea by Dixie Belle. I used a paintbrush to get into the details on the trim and then a roller for the main base of the unit. And I painted the inside of the chest also, so ended up using about 3/4 of a 16-ounce tub of paint. I needed 2 full coats on the solid wood pieces and 3 coats over the MDF. To seal the piece, I used Dixie Belle's clear coat in satin, so not glossy and not matte, and I used 2 coats in total. I was really happy with the colour of the piece, but it was a little bit boring just to being a big blue box, so I decided that I needed to add a stencil to the top to give it a bit more of a wow factor. I chose the stencil Lotus Bloom and gemstone mousse in gold. As I didn't have a tape measure with me, I used a piece of string to work out where the middle of the box was, so that's where I placed my first stencil. I applied the gold mousse with a sponge dabber and just had a very little bit on the sponge as I went along. If you get too much, then it was likely to bleed under the stencil and it won't be a crisp edge. The advantage of having such little paint for the stencil is that it dries really quickly, so I was able to move the stencil and continue the pattern down the rest of the chest almost immediately. To continue the stencil further down the chest, I moved it on top of the final lotus, so I was able to paint in 2 new ones, which made sure that it was in line across the whole piece. To make it a little bit more glamorous, I wanted to use these bronze coloured corner protectors. The colour didn't quite match the gold that I used with the stencil, so I used the gemstone mousse again and lightly dabbed it on top of them. Due to the thickness of the lid, I was only able to use really tiny nails to attach the corner protectors, so I also added a dab of super glue underneath them too. And if you're quite small like me, you might find it useful to know that these smaller hammers exist, which are a bit easier to handle. The new handles I chose were cast iron and filled me with a bit more confidence that they would be able to hold the weight. I put frog tape on the back of one of the handles and marked with a pencil where the holes were. I then put the frog tape on the chest, made sure it was straight with a spirit level, and knew where to drill the holes. Unfortunately, the handles didn't come with their own screws, so I used my own silver screws and decided to paint them. For the paint to stick well, I first used Slick Stick, which is designed for painting over shiny surfaces. I then used my black paint, which was Anchor, as the final step, which matched well with the colour of the handles. And there we have it, the finished piece. So if you're wondering if you can paint MDF, yes of course, you just need to be careful about not using water-based products with the raw MDF. This piece started its life as a bit of an ugly duckling, but it was made with love, and now it's beautiful both on the inside and the outside. I hope you enjoyed this transformation. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching, bye!